I never expected my simple rainwater collection system would lead to all-out war with my HOA when they started stealing my water for their precious garden. How was I supposed to know it would end with their entire office underwater? The first drops hit my new rain barrels with a satisfying plink. After months of saving, I'd finally installed a complete system to water my vegetable garden without running up my bills. 5 connected barrels could store enough water to last through our dry spells. I practically danced as the spring shower filled them, or should have filled them. 3 storms later, something wasn't adding up. My barrels stayed barely a quarter full despite heavy rainfall. I crawled underneath my deck following the gutter lines and found something that made my blood boil. Someone had installed diversion pipes I never authorized. I was still on my knees in the mud when a shadow fell across me. Ms. Reynolds, president of the Pinerest Village HOA, stood at the edge of my property with her clipboard and signature scowl. "Mr. Jackson," she called, not bothering to wait for me to stand up, "your garden beds extend 6 and beyond your approved landscaping plan." I wiped mud from my knees. "Forget my garden beds. Who put these pipes on my gutters?" She glanced at the pipes with practiced indifference. "The association made necessary adjustments to all corner properties. If you'd attended last month's meeting, you'd know we voted to optimize water distribution." "Optimize? You're stealing my rainwater." "Don't be dramatic," she sighed, marking something on her clipboard. "According to bylaw 72.3, all excess precipitation resources benefit community spaces. Your collection system wasn't approved by the architectural committee anyway." 2 maintenance workers in association uniforms appeared behind her, nodding as if this made perfect sense. "I never agreed to this," I said, following as she began walking along my property line. The diversion system was elaborate. Small channels disguised with landscaping rocks led to larger pipes that disappeared underground. "Majority rules, Mr. Jackson. The community garden needs consistent irrigation." I remembered that garden, a pristine showpiece directly behind the HOA office that I'd specifically refused to fund through increased monthly dues. My blood pressure climbed higher. "You're charging me more in dues while stealing resources for my property." My voice rose despite my efforts to stay calm. Ms. Reynolds turned cold eyes on me. "Watch your tone. You're already accumulating violations this quarter." As they walked away, I followed the hidden pipe system to its destination. The elaborate garden they watered primarily benefited properties owned by board members, including Ms. Reynolds' pristine colonial with its perfect view of the manicured space. Back home, I called the city water authority, who explained that rainwater rights were complicated and typically governed by HOA agreements. I'd need to check my contract, the same thick document that probably contained that mysterious bylaw 72.3. While digging through my files, someone knocked. Opening the door revealed a bright yellow violation notice and $300 fine for unauthorized landscape modifications and confrontational behavior toward association representatives. That night, sleep refused to come through my bedroom window. I watched the sprinklers activate in the community garden, wastefully spraying water in all directions despite the day's rainfall. My stolen rainfall. My phone buzzed with a text from my neighbor Marcus. "Saw Reynolds at your place. You okay?" I typed back, "They're stealing my rainwater for their garden." His response was immediate, "Not just yours. Come over tomorrow. Bring your walk and track." The next day, Marcus's dining table disappeared under papers, property maps, HOA bylaws, and water drainage plans. Marcus had battled the association over solar panel installation last year. In one look, he pointed to section 72.3. This clause about excess precipitation was added last year without proper notification. "Technically, it's not binding. Can we fight it alone?" "Tough, but I've been talking with other neighbors." Eleanor down the street is a retired hydraulic engineer. She's been documenting the board's activities for years. That afternoon, Eleanor's kitchen became our war room. At 72, she had fire in her eyes as she spread diagrams across her table. "They're not just taking your water," she revealed, pointing to colored lines crisscrossing a neighborhood map. "They've created an entire underground system diverting from 6 properties to water their gardens and fill that ridiculous decorative pond." Marcus tapped another section. "And look who benefits most. All 5 board members' properties have prime views and access." Eleanor nodded grimly. "They've been playing this game for years. Remember the heritage oak removal, the playground relocation, always benefiting the same properties while citing community interests." My phone buzzed with a new HOA email. "Dues were increasing again to cover landscape irrigation improvements. This is outrageous," I muttered, showing them the message. Eleanor studied her complex diagram, then smiled slightly. "You know what's interesting about water? It always finds the lowest point unless diverted." Meaning, she pointed to a topographical overlay. "The HOA office sits at the bottom of a natural depression without their fancy diversion system. Guess where all this rainwater would naturally flow?" Marcus grinned. "Right into their precious building." "I'm not suggesting anything," Eleanor said, her innocent tone belied by the twinkle in her eyes. She slid detailed schematics of the diversion system across the table. "But hypothetically, quickly if someone were to modify these connection points during the next heavy rain. My heart raced to the implications. Wouldn't they just trace it back to us? Eleanor shook her head. That's the beauty of water. When their system fails, it will simply be returning to its natural flow pattern, nature taking its course as if on cue. My weather app notification chimed. The biggest storm system in 5 years was approaching our region, expected to hit this weekend. Coincidentally, the HOA had scheduled their annual garden showcase for Sunday afternoon. I looked between my new allies, a plan forming. What exactly would these modifications involve? Eleanor's smile widened as she began sketching diagrams on fresh paper explaining pipe connections and flow dynamics in terms even I could understand. For the first time since finding those diversion pipes, I felt a sense of control returning. That night I received another violation notice, this time claiming my rain barrels detracted from neighborhood aesthetic standards. The fine had doubled to $600. I carefully filed the notice with the others, a strange calm settling over me. Ms. Reynolds had no idea what was coming her way. Dark clouds gathered as I hauled supplies into my garage. Friday night, Eleanor had provided detailed instructions and specially designed pipe sections that would redirect the water back to its natural flow pattern. Marcus helped me organize everything while his teenage son kept watch from the front window. 6-hour installation window during the storm. Marcus reminded me, checking off items on our list. You'll need waterproof gear. A car slowed in front of my house. We froze until it passed. Ms. Reynolds has been driving by regularly. I said. She suspects something. Of course she does, Eleanor replied, joining us with freshly laminated diagrams protected from the coming rain. That's why we're moving forward with phase 2 as well. Phase 2 was Marcus's contribution. Documentation. His daughter Zoe, a journalism major, had helped us compile a comprehensive report on the HOA's questionable activities, including water diversion, selective enforcement, and financial discrepancies in landscaping contracts consistently awarded to Ms. Reynolds' brother-in-law's company. We'll distribute these at the emergency meeting they'll inevitably call after the storm, Marcus explained, showing me the folder of evidence. Eleanor's filed water rights complaints with the county already, but will it be enough? I worried. The HOA board had weathered complaints before. Eleanor's eyes gleamed. That's where your neighbor Diane comes in. Diane worked for the local news station. She'd been quietly gathering footage of the HOA's water diversion system and had arranged for a news van to happen to be covering storm damage in our neighborhood Sunday afternoon. The plan was comprehensive, but everything hinged on my part physically modifying the diversion system during the height of the storm when visibility would be lowest. Rain began falling as we finished preparations. The weather report now predicted over 4 in, enough to overwhelm storm drains. Under normal circumstances, with our modifications, the water would follow gravity's pull directly toward the HOA office. Remember, Eleanor cautioned as they prepared to leave, you're not creating anything new, you're simply removing their artificial diversions and letting nature reclaim its course. I barely slept that night listening to the steadily increasing rainfall. By 300 a.m. it was pouring. I donned waterproof coveralls, boots, and a dark rain jacket, then slipped into my backyard with a waterproof headlamp and Eleanor's tools. The storm provided perfect cover. Lightning flashes illuminated my work briefly while thunder masked any noise. I located the main junction box Eleanor had identified, where 6 properties' diversions connected to the community garden system. My fingers trembled as I replaced the directional valve with Eleanor's modified version. This new valve would appear identical but would fail progressively as water pressure increased, returning flow to its natural downhill pattern. 3 more junction points required similar modifications. Water already pulled around my ankles as I worked on the final connection near the property line. Suddenly headlights swept across the street. I doused my lamp and pressed myself against the ground behind shrubs. Ms. Reynolds' SUV crept past windshield wipers, fighting the downpour. She seemed to be patrolling the neighborhood despite the dangerous conditions. After she passed, I quickly finished the final connection and retreated to my garage, heart pounding. By dawn, the storm reached its peak intensity. From my window I watched water flowing exactly as Eleanor had predicted, no longer diverted to the community garden but seeking the lowest elevation point in the neighborhood, the HOA office. I made coffee and waited, occasionally checking the security camera I'd installed facing the street. At 8:17 a.m. Miss Reynolds' SUV splashed through what was now a significant stream running down our road. She parked at the HOA office and stepped out immediately, sinking ankle deep in swirling water. The expression on her face as she waded toward the office door was everything I'd hoped for. Through binoculars I watched her fumble with keys, finally pushing open the door only to be met by a small wave escaping from inside. Within 30 minutes her frantic calls brought the entire board to the scene. They arrived in luxury vehicles that now had to park a block away due to rising water. Even from my vantage point I could hear Ms. Reynolds shouting accusations. By noon the rain lightened. My phone buzzed with an emergency HOA meeting notification scheduled for 3:00 p.m. at the community center, the office being temporarily unusable due to water damage. Marcus texted, "It worked perfectly. Diane's news band is coincidentally filming flood damage on Oak Street. Eleanor added, bring your violation notices and checkbook records. Showtime. I arrived at the community center to find it packed. Homeowners who normally ignored meetings had turned out curious about the flooded office and eager for drama. Ms. Reynolds stood at the front, hair still damp, attempting to maintain composure. This emergency session addresses the catastrophic flooding of association properties, she began, voice tight with controlled rage. Preliminary investigation suggests deliberate tampering with our water management system. Her eyes scanned the room before landing on me. Some individuals recently cited for violations may have engaged in sabotage. Whispers rippled through the crowd. I maintained a neutral expression. This is clearly a targeted attack, she continued, pointing at soggy documents laid out on tables. Our insurance requires a police report for vandalism claims. Just as she pointed her finger directly at me, Eleanor stood up from her seat in the front row. Actually, Miss Reynolds, she projected clearly, I've brought evidence that might interest everyone here. It's tonight or never, Marcus whispered as we huddled under his garage overhang. Rain pounded the pavement like tiny missiles, creating rivers along the curb's perfect conditions. I pulled the hood of my raincoat tighter and nodded. Eleanor's modifications ready. Marcus patted his waterproof bag. 6 redirector valves and the master control switch once installed. Gravity does the rest. My heart hammered against my ribs as we slipped between houses. The storm's roar covered our movements as we located the first hidden diversion pipe behind my azalea bushes. Marcus worked quickly, his hands steady despite the downpour, replacing the HOA's illegal valve with Eleanor's modified version. Remember, he said, we're not creating anything new, we're simply removing their illegal system and letting water flow naturally. We moved house to house, working through Eleanor's map. Old Mrs. Jameson's property was particularly challenging. The HOA had hidden their pipes beneath her prize rose bushes. Lightning cracked overhead as we carefully worked around her plants. Last one, Marcus announced at house 6. Once I flip this master switch, the entire system reverts to natural drainage. I hesitated. What if we get caught? Do you want your water back or not? His eyes gleamed with challenge. The switch clicked with surprising quietness for something so consequential. Now we wait, I said. Sleep evaded me that night. I imagined water flowing, gathering, finding its natural path downhill toward the lowest point in Pinerest Village, directly beneath the WA office. Dawn broke with unusual brightness after the storm. I peered through my blinds to see neighbors gathering at the end of our street, pointing and talking excitedly. Grabbing my coffee, I casually strolled down to join them. Never seen anything like it, said Tom from 2 doors down. The whole office is sitting in a lake. Indeed, water surrounded the single-story WA building, reaching halfway up the door. The precious community garden beside it, the one they'd stolen our water to maintain, now resembled a swamp. A black SUV screeched to a halt at the edge of the water. Ms. Reynolds emerged, designer boots splashing into the puddle. Before she realized its depth, her shriek echoed across the water. Someone call the emergency services, she demanded, turning to the gathering crowd. This is vandalism, property destruction. I sip my coffee. Looks like drainage issues to me. Maybe someone should have consulted a proper engineer before redesigning the neighborhood's natural water flow. Her eyes narrowed on me. This is your doing. Before I could respond, Eleanor appeared beside me, camera in hand, documenting the flood for the Homeowners Association records. She explained pleasantly. Also, I've invited Channel 5 News. They're doing a special on water rights violations in suburban communities. Ms. Reynolds blanched. You wouldn't dare. The county water authorities seemed quite interested in my call this morning, Eleanor continued, especially about unpermitted water diversion affecting multiple properties. A news van pulled up behind us, a reporter and cameraman quickly deploying equipment. Emergency meeting, community center, 1 hour, Ms. Reynolds announced, sloshing back to her car. I shared a secret smile with Marcus and Eleanor. Phase 1 complete. The community center buzzed with angry conversations. When I arrived, nearly every homeowner had shown up, unprecedented for an HOA meeting. I slipped into a seat between Marcus and Eleanor, who had spread her documentation across 3 chairs. Ms. Reynolds tapped the microphone. This emergency session will address the unfortunate flooding incident and necessary repairs. And who's paying for these repairs? Shouted someone from the back. Our insurance will cover. Why was our office in a flood zone to begin with? Interrupted another voice. Ms. Reynolds adjusted her pearl necklace nervously. Natural drainage patterns which you altered, Eleanor called out, standing slowly. The room quieted. I've brought evidence that might interest everyone. This isn't the time. Ms. Reynolds started. Show us. Multiple voices demanded. Eleanor unrolled large property maps across the front table. These are the original drainage plans for Pinerest Village, approved by the county 15 years ago. She overlaid another transparent sheet. And these are the unpermitted modifications made by the current board over the past 3 years. Gasps and murmurs filled the room. The WA has systematically diverted water from 6 properties. Eleanor continued, pointing to my house and 5 others, all to benefit their unapproved garden project and decorative pond. That's ridiculous, Ms. Reynolds sputtered. We've improved community aesthetics with stolen water, I said, standing beside Eleanor. Water you took from my collection system after finding me for installing it in mine, added Mrs. Jameson, rising shakily with her cane. My water bill tripled while my garden died, the Channel 5 reporter was scribbling furiously in the back. Furthermore, Marcus added, approaching with a folder, I've obtained the financial records showing WA funds spent on this illegal system, $2,700 of our dues. The room exploded in outrage. What happened last night, I said clearly over the noise, was simply nature reclaiming its course when these illegal modifications failed during the storm. Ms. Reynolds' face contorted with fury. You sabotaged our system, that's criminal damage. The WA lawyer, previously silent, leaned over to whisper urgently in her ear. Her expression shifted from anger to fear. We may have acted without proper permits, she conceded reluctantly. May have? Eleanor raised an eyebrow, sliding a letter across the table. The County Water Authority disagrees. They've launched an official investigation. As the meeting descended into chaos, I caught Marcus' eye. His slight nod confirmed what I already knew. This was far from over. A reporter approached me as the crowd swelled around Ms. Reynolds. Sir, would you say this represents a growing trend of HOA overreach in your community? I smiled, knowing my next words would appear on the evening news. I simply wanted to collect rainwater. I never expected to uncover a flood of corruption. 48 hours after the flood, my doorbell rang at 7:15 a.m. 2 men in suits stood on my porch, badges in hand. Mr. Davis, County Water Authority, we'd like to ask you some questions about the recent incident at Pinerest Village. My mouth went dry. I invited them in, trying to keep my hands from shaking as I poured coffee. Am I under investigation? I asked directly. The taller investigator, Hansen, shook his head. We're investigating unpermitted water diversion. Your name came up as someone who might have relevant information. Relief flooded through me. I have plenty to share. For the next hour I explained everything: my rain barrels, the mysterious emptiness, catching Miss Reynolds' crew, the fines, and meeting Eleanor and Marcus and the night of the storm. Asked the second investigator, Rodriguez. I chose my words carefully. I believe the heavy rainfall overwhelmed their makeshift system, causing it to fail. Natural water patterns reasserted themselves. They exchanged glances. We've examined the site, Hansen said. Someone modified the diversion valves that night. My heart skipped. That's interesting, very interesting, Rodriguez agreed, especially since those valves shouldn't have existed in the first place. The WA had no permits for any water diversion. They left with copies of my WA violation notices and water bills. As their car pulled away, my phone buzzed with a text from Marcus: emergency meeting tonight, Reynolds going nuclear. The community center was packed tighter than before. Ms. Reynolds stood at the podium looking victorious despite her smudged makeup and wrinkled blazer. I've called this meeting to address the criminal conspiracy against our community, she announced. Our investigation has revealed that certain elements deliberately sabotaged WA property. My stomach clenched as she dramatically placed a plastic bag on the table. This modified valve was recovered from the flood. And we have security footage showing trespassers the night of the storm. Gasps spread through the room. I felt Marcus tense beside me. Before we continue, called a voice from the back. I'd like to introduce myself. A woman in a crisp pantsuit walked forward. Diana Fuller, Assistant District Attorney for the county. My office received some interesting documentation yesterday. Ms. Reynolds' smile faltered. This is a private WA meeting concerning potentially criminal activity, Fuller interrupted, which makes it my business. She turned to address the crowd. My office has reviewed evidence of illegal water appropriation, misuse of WA funds, and falsification of records by the current board. She placed a thick folder on the table. These are cease and desist orders for all board members, freezing WA accounts pending investigation. You can't do that, M. Reynolds sputtered. Actually, I can, especially given the complaints filed by 37 homeowners. I blinked in surprise. Eleanor winked at me from across the room. As for the vandalism during the storm, Fuller continued, any modifications made to an already illegal system would be considered removal of an unpermitted structure. No charges can be filed. The room erupted in cheers and applause. Ms. Reynolds seized the microphone. This community needs leadership. Without us, who will maintain standards? Property values will collapse. Perhaps, said a new voice. It's time for new leadership. Heads turned as Mr. Caper from the end of my street approached the podium. The retired judge commanded instant respect. I propose an interim committee until elections can be held. Volunteers' hands shot up around the room, including mine. You're not taking my position, Miss Reynolds shrieked, gripping the podium. Two security guards approached. Ma'am, we need to vacate and secure the WA office for the DA's orders. As they escorted the board out, someone started a slow clap that built into thunderous applause. 3 weeks later, I unlocked the newly renovated WA office, now reopened as the Community Resource Center. The flood damage had provided an opportunity for much-needed updates, including a public meeting room and transparency boards showing all financial records. Eleanor bustled in with armfuls of plants. The Community Garden Committee sent these there. Thriving now that everyone's contributing properly. Marcus arrived next with his laptop. Water usage reports are in. We're down 30% since implementing the neighborhood-wide collection system. I smiled watching neighbors filter in for our first official meeting. The interim committee had worked tirelessly to rebuild trust. Tonight we'd vote on new bylaws focusing on sustainability and fairness. Quite a difference from when we started. Marcus observed a familiar SUV pulled into the parking lot. Ms. Reynolds emerged looking subdued in casual clothes rather than her usual powers suits. Trouble, Marcus muttered. Let's see, I replied, stepping outside. She approached cautiously. I came to return this. She handed me a check. Your refunded fines plus interest. Thank you. She hesitated. The DA offered me a deal, community service instead of charges, if I cooperate with the investigation into board misconduct. I nodded, unsure what she wanted from me. I've been assigned to help with the new rainwater collection systems, she said, looking pained. They said you're the expert. I should consult. The irony wasn't lost on me. I could send her away. Savor this victory. The committee meets Tuesdays at 6. I said, instead bring rubber boots. We get muddy. Her surprised expression was worth everything. That evening, as the meeting concluded with unanimous approval of our new water sharing program, I stepped outside to check my rain barrels. They stood full and ready for the coming dry season. Across the street I spotted new barrels being installed at 3 houses beyond them. The community garden flourished with vegetables and flowers. Children played in the new splash pad built where Ms. Reynolds' decorative pond had once stood. A far more practical use of water in our climate. Eleanor joined me watching the sunset. You know what they say about water, what's that? It always finds its level in the end. She patted my shoulder. Just like justice in my driveway. My original rain barrels caught the last golden light. They were simple things, just plastic containers designed to capture what falls freely from the sky. Who could have predicted they would wash away corruption and bring a community together?